A very good morning. We're glad you're still with us here on Morning at NTV. We now go into our Kickstarter segment of the show. If you are on Twitter, the hashtag is Morning at NTV, so do be part of the conversation there. Our Kickstarter discussion is about assisting children psychologically. There's a lot that children go through, and understanding child psychology and taking help of child psychologists is very important for parents, especially during stressful times and the multitudes of health crises that we deal with. Watching your child grow up is a delightful experience for parents, but not to forget, it can be overwhelming, scary, and sometimes confusing. First-time parents will relate more to this. In this morning, we have Ruth Kendeje Njawahika, a child psychologist who uses her platforms to advocate and lobby for the rights of marginalized children, and is here to discuss extensively on the silent challenge of child psychology and the rights of the marginalized. A very warm welcome.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you.
This whole idea of children, especially those that are stressed or grappling with challenges and require special attention, that puts psychologists in rooms and discuss how to do it. It's a very pertinent topic. First of all, take me through the plight of a marginalized child and what they need in order to first and foremost live a free and a life that ensures that their childhood is fulfilled.
Thank you, Chris. Again, very nice to meet you. Thank you for having me here.
Good.
So just a little background about just what I do. So I right now live in Kabale, a place called Makanga Hill, and I have a home for girls who have been marginalized, at-risk girls. So one of our main interventions is, because as we say, children, the main thing that they need is love or nurture, and they need compassion, and they need connection. So those are the three main things that a child needs. When a child is born, that is not the beginning of what happens through the rest of their lives. As psychologists, we say the first 1,000 days are key.
The first 1,000 days.
And that's about
3 years?
To their second year birthday. From when they're in their mother's bellies, prenatal, through those first 2 years of their lives.
That's right.
These are the years when their brains are developed, and a lot of that has to do with what goes inside their bodies, their nutrition, things that people don't really think about, like zinc and all that. They formulate their brains right from the prenatal stage. So as they grow, as they are born, and up to the next 2 years of their life, you think about how they're fed, you think about how they're loved or nurtured, and you think about the connection that they have, and it's usually the mother figure, hopefully.
That's right.
You see, even in movies or in television, the skin-to-skin contact. You see people like with bare chests holding their children to the chest. And this is something that for us at Grace Villa and other people who have places like mine that are like orphanages, although that word many people don't like it because it has a bad connotation. So we call ours a home, a safe haven, or a sanctuary. Our kids many of them lacked that from birth. So that is one of the first triggers that causes children who need help.
Okay, you spoke about the first 1,000 days. Now that means pretty much of what somebody becomes later in life is very dependent on these very 1,000 first days. Does that mean whoever we see grappling with the inability to manage life later, perhaps most certainly didn't have a comfortable first 1,000 days?
Most likely. But I won't generalize, but then that is one of the big factors. We know it's a fact that, for instance, the brain development happens, the brain starts to develop within those first 1,000 days. So, but then we've also seen that there are many children who are born in situations of nothing, who actually come out fine, and you attribute that to genetics or getting intervention later on in their lives. But a fact is they are at a disadvantage from children who were nurtured the right way. Of course, there's no perfect parenting.
That's right.
But who were nurtured the right way during those first 1,000 days of their lives.
Okay. There's a lot out there that confuses the modern mother. Breastfeeding. I know it is largely not a psychological issue, but it's one that contributes to a child's psychology and the ability to adopt. When it comes to breastfeeding, many of us know that the first 6 months must be exclusive breast milk.
Yeah.
Today's mother or parents are okay with introducing some things, including formula and any other adaptations. How do you deal with advising such individuals?
Good question. Sometimes it's inevitable.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's a single mom who has to go to work.
That's right.
If she doesn't go to work, the child will have nothing. Yeah, the child will want.
Wow.
So we're not here to judge. But thankfully, things have come into play, like pumping. Am I going into too much?
No, not too much.
Here?
It's important that
like
we discuss it.
Yeah, because the nutrients that are in that milk, I'm not going to go into the nutrients.
Please don't.
Are, I mean, it's the most nutritious meal that a human being will ever have throughout their whole lives.
That's right.
And like we mentioned before, food is a big factor, not just in the body, the lower body, but actually in brain development. So if a child lacks those basic nutrients, and many of them, instead of putting supplements, and you know many of those powders supplement, they're supplementing all those nutrients.
Yeah.
So, but nothing is can compare to the natural best God-given first meal that we have.
All right.
And then also, aside from the milk, just drinking, remember that contact. That's why breastfeeding is also important, because you're holding your child, you're looking at your child, you're doing the eye-to-eye contact, skin to skin. The child is learning to trust, knows that if I'm hungry, this is the person who I cry to, and then the milk comes.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
All right, now let's leave what is purely medical and return to psychological, though it's also medical in a way. Yeah. It only depends on the context within which you're looking at it. What are the traumas that children present with that we can quickly identify and be able to either rectify or prevent?
So usually parents know their children.
Yeah.
You know, you can tell when a child is acting different.
That's right.
We talk to parents about, even if you're at work all day, be the person who gives the child a bath. You know, you look at the body, you look at the skin, you're having a one-on-one with the child in one of the most intimate ways possible.
In other words, be the inspector.
Yes,
yeah.
Yes. And you'll see signs. Like, for instance, if there's physical abuse, you'll see bruises.
You will see the signs.
If you touch a child a certain way and they flinch, then you say, why is the child flinching? Why is the child uncomfortable? Maybe something happened. Maybe at school the teacher is beating the child.
That's right.
And he's saying, you know, and children usually don't report when they think someone is a person of authority. In teenage years, it's a bit more complicated because kids tend to become weird during teenage years. You see them, they like being alone. They like super loud music. They're suddenly uncomfortable with their bodies and all that. So sometimes it's hard to read the signs during the teenage years. But just because your child wants to be alone doesn't mean you allow them to be alone.
That's right.
You know, you still try to draw the child and try and find creative ways. Do they like a sport? And start playing that sport with them. If they like a certain kind of music, you may not love it, but you know, just for your child's sake, you sacrifice because of your child.
Yeah.
Kids stopping to eat. You know, a kid used to love to eat and suddenly they're not eating. That could be an indicator of an eating disorder, or maybe they're just sad. You know that today social media is giving unreasonable standards for how a person should look. Maybe they suddenly think they're too big, they have like body issues. You find children actually talking about death. You know, that's not normal. You know, if a child, well, of course, if they've watched 1,000 awful movies, then yes, they will. But if a child talks about killing themselves, you know, many kids, you think, oh, she's being dramatic. I want to kill myself, but that's a trigger.
It's a trigger.
It's a trigger. Yeah.
So that means there is need to pay attention pretty much to what the child says and how they say it.
Yeah.
Now, within the African context, there is always a tendency to assume that some things will work themselves out, or because, well, you look at something and you're like, okay, I think that is minor. I can let it be. Let me attend to the greater things.
Right.
Have you spoken to parents and helped them on how to identify aspects that could be minimal, some that cannot even be understood clearly, but are really more like in the open, you know?
It's good you mentioned that, because many people think with psychology you're dealing only with the child.
Yeah.
But actually a big part of it is dealing with the parent.
The parent.
Because, you know, you need the parent to read the signs for the child. Yes, we do. And our sessions are, like I just said, with the children as well as with the parents alone. And then also together. Like we have the 3 of them or the 4 of them in the room together. So it's very, very key to involve a parent when you're dealing with a child who has some sort of mental issues. You
said you are operating within the confines of Kabale.
Yes.
Now, this is not to say Kabale is not a place that you should operate, but your services and kind of work mostly resonates with the elite. It will be hard to convince typically a rural parent that that kind of interaction needs to be given attention to. They are busy doing other things. They want the child, if especially they are attending to the gardens or attending anything else, and the child is, you know, misbehaving. Hey, a little spanking here and there. When you encounter the rural folk, how do they receive this kind of need to interact at a more intimate level with a child away from what is widely considered to be the African setting?
So with me, when I moved to Kabale, well, I practiced for a number of years in Massachusetts. Then I moved here and went straight to Kabale to start Grace Villa.
Okay.
I veered away from the traditional way of practicing as a child psychologist. I no longer sit at a desk or sit on a couch or you know, all those images that we have of a child psychologist. Instead, you find ways that are not so dramatic or so direct. For instance, you hold debates with the children and bring in topics that will make them think, and bring their parents to come and watch the debates. Or the guardians, because in my case it's mostly guardians.
Mostly guardians,
Or you have workshops where you have everybody sit in a circle and people share their stories and parents share. And many times if people are sharing and you hear, because stigma is a big thing. So many people will see something and not say something because they're afraid of stigma, or they're afraid of, you know, people looking at the stigma. So you have a workshop, and when this parent hears that the same thing is happening to somebody else's child, it causes them to open up and causes them to come up together with, you know, so you don't force a solution. It's usually guiding the parent or the guardian to come up with the solution themselves, or the child to come up with the solution themselves. So now as a group, they come up with their, you know, what they think would work best. And so it's give and take. There's no blueprint, but then there are clever ways that you can intertwine it. If you see a child in distress, then there I do a direct intervention where I will, and thankfully I work with, we have a wonderful probation office in Kabale that we work with, a good healthcare. So we've found psychologists, counselors in the university and in the high schools, and they're actually great. And even the police has a child protection unit, and we've created a relationship with them. So I also have the authorities and other people who also intervene as well. All
right, that kind of preempted my next question about collaboration and interventions from other stakeholders in order to be able to create a service that serves just about everybody within their settings. Because many times in Africa, the product really doesn't matter so much. It's about who needs that product and how and why they need it. So it's more like tailoring it to fit their particular functionalities. Now, within the school system, many of the people or the learners or the young children you deal with are transitioning to a stage where they need to begin school. Do you have programs that help them do that, or within your work
to help them transition from no school to school?
Because it's important for them to transition.
It is. Thankfully, we have found that putting them right back in school works if you, on the side, have programs that support them.
Do you have that?
Yes, we do.
Are you being supported by the government or?
Not yet.
Not yet?
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah, not yet. But in subtle ways, not directly, but in ways, for instance, like mentioned, the probation office. They are very, very present if if you approach them. And many times you do need someone who people consider of authority to be the person who intervenes, and then people will take notice. I'm finding that, well, many of my children are actually referred to us by schools, by school counselors. And I think that was my first thing that made me happy, knowing that the counselors are actually aware of children's changing mental states. So it was one of the nice surprises that I found, that we actually do have many counselors who are very good at what they do and very intuitive.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Now, this nature of work and intervention borders on a bit of philanthropy. Yeah, something like that. And we know the costs and the need to maintain the flow of philanthropic work. The logistics is quite massive stuff. I don't know how that works out. Is there any financial requirement, especially for the guardians that bring these children, to be able to meet?
Absolutely not. Many of these guardians, they were found by myself. So what happens in our situation? So Grace Villa is the home
Grace
that I run. Grace Villa.
Grace Villa.
Yeah, Grace, which is my mom's name, so I named it after her, and also the word grace.
Okay, of course, the fact that it's gracious, indeed.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And then Villa, which is a home, because I wanted a beautiful home for the children. Even as we're talking about the psychological effect of things, I wanted the kids to come into a beautiful home, and even my own psychological health, I wanted to be in a place where I love, so that I can serve better. So Grace Villa is the home.
Okay.
Our children, most of them are brought to us by community leaders, by the probation office, by schools, like I mentioned before. So they come to us from situations like abuse, or child-headed households, or coming out of rescued from child marriages. So they're coming from situations like that.
Okay.
And then they come into our home. So the law says a child is not supposed to stay within the home for over 3 years. So what we're supposed to do is seek foster homes.
Yep.
We look for relatives. It's usually grandmothers, almost always grandmothers or aunties. Then what we do for those children is make sure that even when they're in that home with a grandmother, we're providing health care, we're providing education, we're providing this social help, assistance. We give them tertiary skills, and we also support the homes that they're in. So we have over 215 kids right now under Grace Villa. 30 are not placed. 30 live with me in the home, while the rest of them have been placed. But every weekend, everyone comes home. It's a requirement where children come home to do different programs, but why we do that is we want to look at the faces of our children. Yeah. And make sure, like I said before, if you interact with a child, you get to know if they're safe at home. And also because we're trying to develop them beyond the mainstream education, trying to give them things that give them confidence in life. I talked about debate. Yeah. Pretty much all our kids are good speakers because we make them, we encourage that. We have a book club, so we're very big on encouraging reading. We have a writers club, and kids, that's one way where you see what's happening in a kid's mind, through the writers club, and different interventions like that.
Okay, so what are the numbers here we are talking about in terms of the children that you...
At Grace Villa?
Yep.
Over 200 who we directly support, and over 400 children and community members, like families, who we indirectly support.
So it covers for perhaps 3-year-olds to teenagers,
you're right.
Even including you talked about those that have been rescued from forced marriages. That's a different kind of category because they come with a lot of challenges. First of all, they might not have experienced a good first 1,000 days, and then later in life, 15 years down the road, they are forced into child marriages. The need for psychosocial support for those ones is a bit more than the younger ones, and it's a bit intricate. For example, if one has experienced violence in a marriage that they've been forced into, they've perhaps even gotten pregnant and have given birth, what is the approach to that?
Chris, you should be a psychologist because
Huh?
you should be a psychologist yourself because of the way you've dissected these situations.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. There's no tailor-made approach there's no tailor-made approach.
That's right.
I mean, there's no general. Each one, is tailor-made.
You attend to the way
each
they are brought in.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we try not to say this one is more drastic than this one. We try to say so that we give because everybody's going through their own degree of trauma, and to them this means everything.
That's right.
So, but you're very correct. Everybody has specific ways that we deal with what they've been through, and we do have different methods that we deal with the different situations.
Okay. So many of us across the country are still grappling with the effects of COVID-19.
Yes.
The disruption to normal life was enormous. Some were able to come out of it. Others are still struggling. Some increasingly looking like they will never. How do we as a country move forward, especially when it comes to social grooming of young ones?
So I'm going to talk from the perspective of where I live.
That's right.
Where COVID affected them less health-wise, but more economics-wise, and more with the children. You're well read. You read all the statistics of children who got pregnant, kids who. So I find we have kids who, during COVID, worked, and now you're saying it's time to go back to school. So many of them say, okay. But they're in school, they have businesses on the side, How are we going to now balance the two? And suddenly the dynamic between teacher-student has changed because now they feel like adults. And suddenly you're here telling them what to do. So COVID has affected us in many, many interesting ways. With us at Grace Villa, although it was a tough time, it was a time that we took advantage of because we had the children.
At the time you already established?
Yes.
Okay.
I should mention, we turned 10 next year.
10?
Yes. So
congratulations.
I've been here for 9 years. And I should mention that on Friday we have a big celebration at Pratea Hotel.
What will that be?
It's our end of year, and it's the first celebration as we count down to 10 years of Grace Villa.
So you're going to be having a series of events in the run-up to the grand celebrations.
A marathon, we'll invite you.
Okay.
So at Pratea it's at 6 p.m. and some of our children, like 30 kids, are coming to perform and get to meet people and tell their stories. So it will be a night of inspiration and of giving, because it's a charity dinner.
All right, so as we enter the final bend of this discussion, there is something that every one of us, especially those that have gone to school and have gotten into corporate jobs, the whole issue of parenting continues to, disturb, and some are able to quickly dismiss a few things here and there. Of course, it's something we touched on at the beginning of the interview, but I want us to just revisit a few aspects. Relationships between parents and children today, it's like there is no boundary. A 5-year-old today is told to speak their mind to daddy and mommy, and usually what's on their mind could be really weird. They want to talk to you like they talk to Solomon at school. Yes. They want to talk to you like they talk to Promise. Yes. That alone kind of distorts the whole arrangement and the setting that we are in. Most parents are afraid to act the way they want to act, or raise voices sometimes the African way, because somebody will say, hey, that is abusing the rights of the child. And then there is a child who is comfortable raising their voice to their father or their mother. These challenges in society today, how do we transition to a harmonious environment where parenting is clear and transformative, but we still hold on to the fact that I am daddy, you are my son, you are my daughter?
Well, parenting is not for cowards.
Wow. Repeat that.
Parenting is not for cowards.
Well, I think that should be able to sum it up. You must be bold to be a parent, but cautiously. Some of the parents might take bold to be the kind of actions or way of doing things that goes or takes us back to 1940. Many thanks, Ruth Kandeje and Jabahika. And of course, you are the ED
the founder, yes, and ED.
Grace Villas, that is in Kabale. Just bring us up to speed again as we transition to our man in the field, Stephen Mbide. When is the date for the grand finale of celebrations?
It's on 11/11, this Friday, at 6 p.m. at Protea Hotel in Kololo. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. Stephen Mbide, I hope you are in shape, but as you prepare to give us the update on what's happening wherever you are, let's take a break. We shall be back with Stephen Mbide.